Welcome back. I hope you're all doing amazing. Today we are going to be doing a tutorial on a stock plugin only vocal FX chain in Logic Pro 10. Now, all of this can apply to any DAW using any set of plugins, any compressors, any EQ. We're going to try to go over kind of general things about how each of them work, what they're doing to the track, and see how we can get a good vocal sound out of a raw, clean sample. So let's start by just sort of listening to what my chain is going to sound like. We can see what we've got going on here. I've got a couple of buses and 6 active plugins. I will then go to a clean copy and go through one by one what each of them is doing to the sounds. Let's start with just the instrumental and the effected vocals.
Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me.
All right, so that just gives you an idea of what this song sounds like. Let's go ahead and mute our instrumental and our vocal and move to the clean copy. This has no processing on it. The first thing I'm going to do is move our cycle over a little bit so that we can start where the vocal starts.
Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me.
You can see it's a lot quieter, so we've got a good amount of gain staging going on in this chain. We've got some reverb, a little bit of delay going on. In the dry, it's very kind of quiet, a little bit muffled sounding. We get a much cleaner sound with all of these effects going on. So the first thing I do on any effects chain is I put a gain plugin. The reason for this, you can see I'm not adding anything, I'm not doing anything with it, but the reason I always start with a gain plugin is if you go ahead and watch the best way to do volume automation in Logic tutorial, I explained that it's good to use the gain plugin for automating during mixing. So I use gain for managing different levels throughout the track. In this case, I'm not actually doing anything in the bass processing with it, but we will start by going to Utility and throwing a gain plugin on here. Next thing I've got is a de-esser. I like to keep my de-essing early in the chain so that, let's see, we go to Dynamics, de-esser 2. Now, what a de-esser does is it takes all of our hisses, our P's, our B's, all of our sounds that are going to hit our mic in a way that we don't like. So let's go ahead and play through our clean audio and just take a look at our detection and reduction. What we want to do is bring down these high-pitched sibilance sounds and try to clean up the upper register a little bit.
Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me.
You can see on the S's,
Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles.
So on the word miles, on the day by day, it's detecting a little bit of frequency and it's adding a little bit of reduction. Let's bring our threshold down a little bit so it's a little bit more sensitive. Bring our reduction up a little bit. For my voice, my sibilance tends to be in the 6 to 7K range. I think that's a pretty common range for most voices.
Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me.
Increase the reduction a little bit.
Getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me.
Let's take a look at the settings I've got on my template. I've got a little bit higher threshold and
a
a little bit lower reduction, so we're going to bring it down more heavily. I ended up with around the same frequency.
Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me.
All right, that sounds pretty good to me for now. Next up, I've got pitch correction. So I've got a whole video on the pitch correction plugin in Logic. So I'll link to that in the description. Let's copy this over, take a look at what I've got. I've got a very slow, so this is for my template. So I've got a chromatic and I've got a fairly high response time. So what I'm going to do is take a listen and kind of play with our pitch correction based on what I think the track needs. This is a pretty kind of R&B, kind of soulful sort of vocal, so I want to be fairly gentle on the pitch correction.
Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me. Moving on.
I'm going to put that around 95, very mild pitch correction. There's not that much that needs to be cleaned up in this particular sample. Up next, we've got an EQ. So for my EQs, I like to take out a whole bunch of low end. I like to go up to around 150.
Moving on and getting older.
This is a fairly high-pitched vocal, so we can even go a little bit up. I like to just kind of cut off the back of here. We want to free up as much of this lower range for our bass, for our kick, for our percussion as possible, so that our vocal doesn't get too muddy with our other instruments. For my voice, which is what this sample is from, I like a little bit of a brighter sound, so I try to put a little bit of upper mid-range in here. I'm going to narrow down this band just a little bit. And then maybe a little bit of a shelf up here for a bit of extra brightness to bring back that maybe the de-esser is taking away. I'm also going to bring up our gain until we get later in the chain so that we can hear a little better.
Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me. Moving on
A little
and
bit of a
getting
mid-scoop too. Let's see what I've got in my template.
Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles
Yeah, so a little bit of a mid-scoop and then just a high
Moving
boost.
on and getting older.
I've got a little bit of a lower because normally I'm singing a little bit lower. Like I said, we want to cut in just a little bit and take some of the mud out of that lower mid-range.
Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me. Moving on and getting older.
This is a lot brighter just from the reverb, so we'll get into that in a little bit.
Day by day.
After this, I've got a couple compressors. So the first compressor I'm doing is a stock multipressor. So I'm going to start by copying over using Option Drag our multipressor from the template. Let's see what I'm doing.
Moving on.
I've got a little bit kind of repeating the same ideas as in the EQ. I've got a little bit of a mid scoop, a little bit of an upper mids boost to brighten back up what I'm to continue to brighten what I'm doing with the EQ, and just a little bit of kind of an exciter effect. I'm almost using the multipressor a little bit like a dynamic EQ,
Moving on and getting
although we're squashing it instead of EQing
Day
it.
by day, I'm losing
The multipressor is subtle. It does add a little bit of color, although for colored impression, that's what we're doing with this second stage of compression. So in this compressor, I've got the Studio VCA compressor. I've got a -27 threshold, a 3:1 ratio, 8.5 dB of makeup, a medium attack, and a fairly slow release. I've got distortion set to hard, and let's take a listen to what this does to the vocal.
Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me. Moving
You can see this is where I'm really getting a lot of of my gain from.
Day by
And with
day,
an
I'm
8.5
losing
dB
miles
makeup, I'm
and
adding a lot
miles
of
of
color to the sound, and I
me.
really like this studio
Moving
VCA on
on and
vocals.
getting
I'm
older.
staying between 0 and -5 dB. That's where I
Moving
think it
on,
sort of catches it in a way that I think sounds musical.
moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me. Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me. Moving on.
Now, that is about it for my bass plugins. I do have a turned off reverb in here, which is an ice plate. I keep it pretty low if I want to turn it on, but I've started doing my reverb in parallel using aux tracks. So I've stopped using this plugin on my chain. If you don't want to do parallel reverb, then I would have reverb be the final step in your chain. However, if you put your reverb on a separate chain, you get a lot more control over it. You can EQ your reverb separately, which is very valuable. And you can also control how much of the vocal is hitting it, so you get a little bit more of a fine-tooth control over your wet-dry on the reverb. So I'm going to set up two sends. I'm going to go to my vocal delay bus and to my vocal verb bus. So we're going to option click these to get full sends. Let's take a look at my vocal delay preset first. So I have these saved as presets in my user channel strip settings. Now to save a channel strip as a preset, you go to setting, save channel strip setting as, and then you can give it a name. This one's BBVox 3 gain. That's just my naming convention. And you do the same for aux channel strip settings. You can see it comes with its own delay, its own reverb. If you'd like to play with some of the Logic stock presets, those are also excellent. So I've got a Quadrivox on here. This is not a stock plugin, so we're going to turn that off and use a stereo delay stock Logic plugin. Instead, the Quadrivox is just a Eventide delay plugin. So on our stereo delay, I've got 800 milliseconds on the left, 430 on the right, a little bit of feedback. I've got the output to be mostly wet. This is because we are controlling our wet dry using the amount of send. I'm actually going to bring our send down a little bit because I don't like too much delay. So what happens, let's turn off our compressor and just give it a listen and see how it sounds with just the delay on.
Moving on and getting older.
So you can see what happens is you get a lot of the delay cutting into the vocals. So a really common technique is to sidechain your delay to the vocal. This is why we put our delay on an aux track. So we only really want the delay to come during gaps in the singing to fill up the space a bit more. So what we do is we add a compressor. We are going to sidechain to our source audio. And what this is going to do is duck the delay to the original vocal. And I might make a separate tutorial to go into a bit more detail on this.
Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me.
So you can see whenever the source clean vocal is playing, it ducks the sound a bunch. And that's going to clean up a lot of the delay from getting in the way of our main lead vocal.
Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me. Moving on.
Now let's talk about our reverb. So I've got a lot of EQ manipulation going on in my reverb. I'm cutting off all of the lower mid-range, doing a big dip and a shelf in the upper register. I want to have a very clean mid-range and upper mid-range only on the reverb. Reverb can get you into a good amount of trouble with muddying up the mix because it's so kind of pervasive. It's sort of always in the background, and it can get in the way of other instruments. So if I turn off my EQ, let's solo our instrumental and let's add a bit more of reverb just to kind of show.
Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me. Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing.
Really cleans up the mids when we add an aggressive EQ like this. Before the EQ, I'm doing one level of de-essing. Reverb with sibilance sounds even worse than normal audio with sibilance. So I've got one level before the Space Designer to really kind of make it. You have to be careful with de-essing on a clean vocal because what can happen is you can kind of give yourself a lisp. When the de-esser hits the S's too hard, it starts to make them sound more like a th sound. So what I'm doing is I'm getting that effect a little bit on the signal that's going to be sent to the reverb, and then a little bit after to get even more of the high-pitched hissing sound out of the reverb. And then finally, I'm just cutting off with a shelf anything over a certain point to make sure the reverb isn't getting a little too kind of squeaky, harsh, bright.
Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me.
And that is about it. Those are all the plugins and the 2 bus send aux tracks that I use as a starting vocal template on my productions. Let's go back to our original treated audio and just do a kind of A, B of the 2.
Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me.
And back to our dry vocal one more time.
Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me. Moving on and getting older. Day by day, I'm losing miles and miles of me.
This one sounds a little different because I forgot to sidechain its vocal, I believe. All right. On the bus, I have it sidechained to this one, so because I use the same buses, so that's why the delay is a little different in this one. But that about wraps it up. I hope this was helpful. Some of you may be able to tell this last compressor is what's doing a lot of the work, but it's really bringing out and leveling up a lot of the subtle things that we're doing in here. So these earlier plugins are still important. It's still good to play with them. Pitch correction in particular can give a lot of character and fix up a lot of problems with a vocal sample. So be sure to check out my more detailed video on pitch correction in Logic. I hope you enjoyed. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. If I made any mistakes, feel free to let me know in the comments. Be sure to like and subscribe for more Logic Pro 10 tutorials. And I hope you all have a wonderful day, night, evening, morning, afternoon, whenever you may be watching this. And I'll see you next time.